You know Optimus Prime, but do you know Optimus Primal? When it comes to the Transformers universe, there's more than meets the eye.
Before the beginning, there was Primus, and there was Unicron.
Now, finding one definitive Transformers timeline is impossible, as Hasbro, the company that owns Transformers, has never declared a prime reality. But if you weave in and out of the different universes that make up the Transformers' incredibly complex multiversal tapestry, you'll soon realize that most sagas are variations of the Generation 1 narratives. The original stories first told in the Transformers' original 1984 cartoon and Marvel comic book series. Patterns emerge, commonalities appear, and from the many we can pull one. Covering it all would take a book, or 3, but we put together a unified timeline with a few deviations to explore the really unique diverging realities to help you navigate the increasingly complex Transformers multiverse. So, if you're ready,
let's roll!
Light and dark, order and chaos, good and evil. Primus and Unicron. First introduced with zero background in 1986's Transformers the movie, the cartoon eventually elaborated that Unicron was built by a mad genius. That explanation was somewhat underwhelming for such a momentous character, so the comic books later assigned Unicron a more fitting origin. For Simon Furman's comics, Unicron is a dark god locked in an eternal battle with the light god Primus. The idea soon solidified into an integral part of Transformer lore, though like any myth, the details constantly shift. First, Primus and Unicron are from a lost pantheon of gods. Then by issue number 74, Unicron is the destroyer of the previous universe, while Primus had been born to protect the current universe. The sentient core of the universe, known as the One, created Unicron, then split Primus off of him. By the 2013 hardcover history The Covenant of Primus, the two gods become a singular being that develop opposing personalities and split into two. Primus and Unicron may wax and wane in importance through the different realities, but they're almost always there, setting the cogs in motion for billions of years' worth of stories. In every version of the story, Primus and Unicron's battle comes to an end, but that end is rarely permanent. Primus creates a planet Cybertron by transforming into it and spawns robotic beings in his image to do battle against Unicron. Some stories refer to the 13, the original legendary primes who set all of Transformer history in motion. Other tales, like IDW's Transformers Lost Light comics, speak of godlike Transformers with Primus' essence split between them. In the movie universe, the first Transformers are called the Dynasty of Primes. Regardless of universe, though, the first Transformers inevitably arise, powerful, wise, and ancient, measuring their lives in the billions of years. Membership shifts depending on the reality, but counted among their number have been Alpha Trion, Autobot member and possessor of glorious robot whiskers, Prima, the first Transformer, and Liege Maximo, the very short-lived big bad of the Marvel Generation 2 comics. And of course, there's Megatronus, also known as the Fallen, the very first Decepticon. Time itself is fairly irrelevant to the origin of the Transformers, as they live for millions of years. Even the youngest of those beings are prehistoric, but few of the Transformers portrayed in the comics and cartoons are among the firstborn on Cybertron. Fans of the live-action movies might know the Allspark as the source of all Transformer life, a concept introduced in the first Michael Bay film. The idea of the Allspark grew out of the time-bending Beast Wars cartoons, where the concept of a Transformer's spark was first established. Like a human soul, the spark is what makes each Transformer a living being. When Transformers die, their spark goes out. They can't just be repaired and turned back on like machines. Eventually, Primus and the Allspark were folded into one origin story when Transformers Prime adapted the Allspark to be the vessel through which Primus created life. Early Cybertronian history is murky and chaotic, even in the best documented of realities. Warring cities, battling factions, expansion into the cosmos, there's a lot of ground to cover, and few pieces of Transformers media delve into ancient events beyond passing mentions. There is one aspect of this history that rears its ugly head time and time again: the Quintessons. Making a brief yet unsettling debut in the 1986 animated movie, our first glimpse of the tentacled creatures was but a taste of things to come. Quintessons don't always appear at the same time in Transformer history, but in every rendition they are vicious oppressors. The Five Faces of Darkness episodes established that the mechanical squid-like race had created and enslaved the Transformers before being overthrown. In newer interpretations, Quintessons aren't creators, but conquerors. In the 2002 Dreamwave comic series Transformers Generation 1, the Quintessons once seized control of ancient Cybertron. Their eventual expulsion led to a golden age, one that lasted until Megatron discovered that the Quintessons still secretly controlled Cybertron's ruling council, prompting the Great War. And in Netflix's War for Cybertron Trilogy, we learned that before Megatron fought Optimus and Ultra Magnus, the trio allied under Alpha Trion to overthrow their Quintesson masters. Above any other Transformer, there's always been one determined to decide his own fate at any cost: Megatron.
You are either lying or you're stupid! I'm stupid! I'm stupid!
Early Megatron was fairly simple, but over the years he's transformed from a stereotypical villain into a character with complex motivations. His story almost always begins the same, rising to power millions of years ago in the gladiator pits of Cybertron during a long-past golden era. 1986's Transformers UK Annual first established this path, wherein the brutal gladiator Megatron initially aligned himself with Optimus Prime. In IDW's Megatron Origin comic book miniseries, he's a pacifist who chafes under the corrupt Cybertronian Senate. His dissent drives him to violence. He builds a devout following through gladiator warfare and eventually assembles an army powerful enough to overthrow the Senate. This rebellion succeeds with help from none other than Orion Pax, who would go on to become Optimus Prime. But though Megatron's rise often begins with promise, it always results in a divided, failing Cybertronian society. Across Transformers realities, one constant almost always remains: the Great War. It begins in nearly every reality, across every Cybertron, somewhere between 4 to 9 million years ago, when Megatron and his Decepticons declare war on the Autobots. The thing is, rarely since the earliest days of the cartoon has Megatron begun the war simply out of a desire to conquer. Rather, the war comes because Megatron feels that only he has the vision to lead Cybertronians to victory, prosperity, and eventual peace. In the aligned continuity, which is comprised of the cartoons, novels, comics, and games, starting with the War for Cybertron video game and ending with 2015's Robots in Disguise cartoon, Orion Pax and Megatron both fought to overthrow the planet's caste system. But when Orion Pax is chosen over Megatron to become a Prime, the Decepticon feels seething jealousy and sparks the eternal civil war. In IDW's The Transformers Autocracy miniseries, Megatron joins with Orion to overthrow the tyrannical Zeta Prime, but once the formerly peaceful bot gets a taste of power, he is loath to give it up. In the most recent accounts, Megatron kills Alpha Trion before the War for Cybertron Trilogy begins, because he doesn't really feel his mentor is leading the Cybertronians down the right path. The act of murder splits Cybertron into the Autobots and the Decepticons. Evil is a relative term, and Megatron is an especially complex villain. From his perspective, the Great War nearly always begins as a rebellion against an unfair system. Sadly, it usually leads him down a path where he becomes more brutal and tyrannical than those he once fought against. The Great War rages for millions of years, devastating the Transformers' home planet. Back in the franchise's earliest days, Cybertron is so thoroughly decimated that Optimus has to lead a contingent of Autobots off-world in search of more Energon, the lifeblood of the Transformer race. Megatron pursues the Autobots, and the ensuing attack causes both factions' ships to crash to Earth, leading to the events of the original cartoon. In some cases, there were planet-wide tragedies that led to Prime and Megatron's departure. In two of the newest renditions, the War for Cybertron and Cyberverse cartoons, the exodus begins when Optimus ejects the Allspark into space to keep it out of Megatron's hands. With the source of all Cybertronian life missing, Prime only realizes his mistake as the planet begins to die. He has no choice but to venture to Earth to recover the cube, all while the War for Cybertron pushes the planet past the point of no return. Meanwhile, in the world of the Transformers Prime cartoon, Megatron's lust for power renders Cybertron uninhabitable. The Decepticon leader infects the planet with dark energon, a substance not terribly unlike our own world's uranium. After learning what Megatron had done, Optimus Prime determines that Cybertron will take millions of years to recover, leading to the Great Exodus with every Autobot fleeing to Earth. While Optimus and Megatron lie dormant on Earth, life continues on. In 1996's Beast Wars, we turn our focus to the Maximals, the future descendants of the Autobots. Optimus Primal, yes, that is his real name, and no, he's not related to Prime, leads a small group of Maximals through warp space in pursuit of this story's Megatron. This time around, Megatron doesn't lead the Decepticons, but their descendants, the Predacons. These warring factions crash land on prehistoric Earth. Beast Megatron has traveled back in time after finding a message from the original Megatron with instructions to kill the dormant Optimus Prime. More time travel shenanigans ensue, but the Maximals ultimately fend off the Predacons and return to their own time. Meanwhile, in Netflix's War for Cybertron Kingdom, the search for the Allspark lands this universe's Optimus Prime and his crew in the middle of this separate timelines version of the Beast Wars conflict. After what feels like their trillionth crash landing on Earth, the Autobots and Decepticons meet the Maximals and Predacons, who have once again traveled back in time. The two factions are born from the scant remains of the surviving Cybertronians and live under constant threat from Galvatron and Nemesis, Unicron's lackeys reborn from future Megatron and Optimus's dead bodies. It's never established exactly how far into the future they come from. The time travel gets even more wibbly-wobbly in this universe, but it firmly establishes the prehistoric Maximal and Predacon battle as an integral part to the Transformers timeline, and one that's here to stay. Most Transformer tales begin in the modern era when the Cybertronians bring their war to Earth, inevitably entangling humans in their alien conflict. The stories of this time are too numerous and varied to recount, but suffice it to say you'll be hard-pressed to find a comic, cartoon, or movie that doesn't drag humans into the Great War. In the original Generation 1 cartoon and comics, the Autobots and Decepticons awaken on Earth in the 80s after lying dormant for millions of years. Some more modern tales, like IDW's 2005 comic series, show Optimus, Megatron, and their troops landing on Earth in modern days to begin with, having never lain dormant at all. Sometimes humans even bond with Transformers. These human Cybertronian symbionts are one form of what's known as a headmaster, with the human literally transforming into the bot's head. Other times, like in the IDW continuation Transformers Regeneration 1, the humans gain superpowers, allowing them to battle the giant bots. Whether our planet hosts Energon, the Allspark, powerful artifacts, or just good old-fashioned human interference, it seems humanity's home is fated to intersect with the Transformers' endless war. Unicron was, is, and will be again. The massive planet eater first threatens the Transformers in the 1986 animated film set in the far-flung future of 2006. Unicron reformats Megatron into Galvatron and creates a new, more deadly breed of Decepticon. Stepping up to fill the shoes of a temporarily deceased Optimus Prime, Hot Rod becomes Rodimus Prime and defeats the Galactic Devourer once and for all. Sort of. After Unicron was defeated in the animated film, he made a detour through the Marvel Comics continuity, terrorizing their universe instead. His first appearance in this series is notable for setting up Unicron's godlike powers, and his ability to manipulate the fabric of time, pulling Galvatron out of the future. Since then, across these timelines and multiverses, Unicron's return has become all but inevitable. In 2018, after over a decade of avoiding the ultimate evil, IDW Comics finally brought Unicron back with a vengeance. The massive battle unified the Transformers and brought 13 years of comic book battle to an end. Unicron also appears in the live-action movies where Transformers: The Last Knight reveals that Unicron is the Earth itself, so it seems that we've not seen the last of the Planet Eater after all. Nearly every Transformers story brings the robots to Earth as they flee Cybertron, but there is one notable exception. 2001's Transformers Robots in Disguise cartoon is a bit of a wild card. Robots in Disguise does take place on Earth, but instead of an ancient war spilling over onto our planet, this particular show sees Optimus Prime leading his Autobots to prevent Megatron and his Predacons from locating an ancient Cybertronian secret, the immensely powerful Fortress Maximus. The show never gets into these Transformers' history much, but there are some interesting quirks to unpack. This version of Ultra Magnus, for instance, is Optimus Prime's brother rather than an old friend. And on the topic of quirks, who could forget Megatron's six-changer form? In this reality, the Predacon can transform into, among other things, a giant floating hand, a bat, and a two-headed dragon. As for the Decepticons, the only ones in the entire universe are created when Megatron gets his hands on a small handful of Autobot protoforms, essentially blank slates, and brainwashes them into sinister new creations. Robots in Disguise was the first time a Japanese-produced Transformers series was adapted for Western audiences, born from the Car Robots anime. This adaptation was also the first taste of what would become countless official Transformers reboots. Before this point, each new comic or cartoon would simply tweak Generation 1's continuity to fit its plot. But Robots in Disguise cut the timeline loose and gave creators free rein. As a result, Transformers lore has since run wildly in every imaginable direction.
Oh! I found my very own Minicon! Megatron will love me for this!
Launched in 2004, Transformers Armada was the second full reboot to the Transformers timeline. In the world of Armada, there aren't just Autobots and Decepticons, there's also a third faction called Minicons. In this timeline, Unicron disguises himself as a Cybertronian moon and creates some Minicons to kick the Autobot and Decepticon war into high gear. The tiny bots have the ability to boost the power of their larger brethren, naturally leading to the Autobots and Decepticons struggling for control over this new breed of Transformers. Eventually, both factions realize the Minicons are too dangerous and cast them off into the far reaches of space. Predictably, the Minicons end up on Earth, where they are rediscovered millions of years later by the Cybertronians. This brings the Transformers into the modern era and, as is tradition, drags humans into their fight. Unicron is defeated by the end of Armada, but his story continues in two more series. Transformers Energon jumps into the then-near future of 2010 and chronicles yet another resurrection of the Planet Eater. Transformers Cybertron sees the Transformers fleeing to Earth after the black hole left by Unicron's destruction threatens their home planet. Though it's one of the pillars of the Transformers multiverse, this alternate timeline had quite a few detractors, and the repeated focus on Unicron left audiences more than a little burnt out. Though 2007's live-action Transformers initially seemed to be a faithful homage to Generation 1, it would quickly grow into an entirely new beast. The Transformers in Michael Bay's films are not creations of Primus, but of a mysterious alien race not so cleverly dubbed the Creators. The later films retconned a lot about the earlier ones, but the important part is that the Transformers come to Earth about 19,000 years before modern times. At this point, the Cybertronians plan to harvest our sun for energon until they discover humans and mostly agree not to wipe us out. But the Fallen, one of the original Transformers from the dynasty of Primes, wants to take the sun anyways. This sparks the division of the Transformers and the formation of the Decepticons. In other words, this is a rare timeline where the Great War isn't sparked by Megatron but his master. The Fallen is eventually defeated, but the war rages on. A recurring habit of the Bay films is to interweave Cybertronian history into our own. In the 2007 film, they're revealed to have been responsible for humanity's technological advancement. In Dark of the Moon, they're the reason for the space race. In Age of Extinction, the creators were responsible for eradicating the dinosaurs. And according to The Last Knight, they aided King Arthur and fought alongside the Allied forces in both world wars. The Transformers had been on Earth for centuries by the events of the first film, but the Autobot-Decepticon War flares up once again when the Allspark is rediscovered, kicking off the entire live-action series.
It's you and me, Megatron.
No, it's just me, Prime.
Then, 2018's Bumblebee once again changed the live-action universe and rebooted the entire story. Instead of Transformers landing on Earth millions of years ago, Bumblebee becomes the first Autobot to land on Earth in 1987. He encounters a couple of Decepticons who also landed on Earth, as he awaits the arrival of Optimus Prime and other Autobots as they flee the war happening on Cybertron. While much of Transformers' past is relegated to hazy, constantly changing myths, the future remains a diverging branch of possibilities. In 2008's Transformers Animated, the Autobots win the Great War by shooting the Allspark into space and keeping its power out of Megatron's hands. Ultra Magnus then leads the Autobots to victory, after which Cybertron thrives while Megatron and the Decepticons flee to the fringes as renegades. This iteration of Optimus Prime is just a young asteroid miner who stumbles upon the Allspark years later in modern times. The inevitable clash between his crew and Megatron sends them crashing to Earth, where they lie dormant for just 50 years. When they wake in a 22nd century Earth, they find the planet awash in robots thanks to a human scientist who reverse-engineered Megatron's body and created his own mechanical life. Animated is one of the more unique takes on Transformers history. Two Beast Wars characters even make an appearance, Black Arachnia and Waspinator. If it weren't so wildly detached from established series lore, this next-generation continuity could have been an interesting bridge between the robotic Transformers of the past and present and the techno-organic bots of the future. In a franchise as diverging and messy as Transformers, it's hard to say which ending is the definitive finale. But one particular series provides a better candidate than others, the Beast Wars sequel series, Beast Machines. The Predacon leader enslaves all of Cybertron, reformatting Maximals and Predacons alike into mindless drone servants. The Beast Machines cartoon is a dark dystopian tale, where a handful of Maximals led by Optimus Primal fight a guerrilla battle in a war that was over before it started. The story introduces a number of fascinating concepts. Transformers are more like cyborgs and beast machines, as they embrace their organic sides and become techno-organic creatures, ones that don't so much transform, rather morphing between their alternate forms.
What are we? Robots or animals?
Both. And neither.
Well, that sure clears it up.
This future even has Botanica, what is believed to be the only plant-based Transformer in all the multiversal timeline. The series ends with Maximals freeing Cybertron from Megatron's control, thereby saving the planet. The entire Transformer race is reborn into fully techno-organic beings, ushering in a new golden age of Cybertron. Outside of the Beast Machines cartoon, this future was only ever briefly explored in a couple of short-lived comic books. So while this techno-organic Cybertronian destiny isn't quite a universal ending, it provides the closest thing to a final, happy ending the Transformers franchise has ever received.